John's here with our daily talk of the tiles for Wednesday, May 28th, 2025. If this showed up in your feed or someone sent it to you, we invite you to visit youtube.com/modernmahjong and subscribe so you don't miss out on our other videos. We are heading to New York City. Join Donna Kassman and myself for an evening reception of social games to connect our Mahjong community and raise funds for the Alzheimer's Association, taking place at the Honors Bridge Club on June 17th from 5 to 8:30. We hope you'll join us. You could register on modernmahjong.com. $60 for the fee includes wine, cheese, fruit, dessert, and social games. Seating's limited. Today's tile topic: who gets the discard? And is it always next in line? The answer to that is no. If one player calls for Mahjong and another for an exposure, the tile goes to the player that's calling Mahjong, even if they're not next in line. And this is even if the player that was only calling for an exposure began to expose. That part was just answered on a frequently asked question of the league's website. And by the way, we are having a Zoom on June 5th. So if you are interested in learning the 2025 card, preparing to pivot, this is a 75-minute Zoom taught by myself and Donna. We're founders of Modern Mahjong and the Facebook group of almost 70,000 Mahjong players, Mahjong community. So this is taking place June 5th, 7 p.m. for 75 minutes. It's live only, not a replay. Space is limited, and you can register for $36 on our website. And if you're looking to improve your Canasta game, our online intermediate series is taking place June 3rd, 10th, and 17th. This you could register with My Jewish Learning. It's bit.ly/CanastaJune. And finally, before we get back to our talk, if you want to learn to play Mahjong, we have a 4-part series on Zoom. That's also on Modern Mahjong. And our PDF you could find on Modern Mahjong. And now, back to our video. So who gets the discard? Another reason it's not always next in line is if two players are calling, either both for Mahjong or both for an exposure, the general rule is that the player next in line would get the discard. So player A discards, player B next in line, they get it. However, there is an important exception. Next in line does not get the tile if a player other than next in line begins to either expose tiles to call that discard or picks up the discard and places it on the flat top part of the rack. So let's just go over some basics. Who's next in line? Player A discards, player B's next, but where are they sitting? They are sitting to the right of player A because the word player conveniently ends in R. R starts right. Great way to remember. L, left, is the only thing you do is push out the walls, and wall conveniently ends in L. So player ends in R, play goes to the right, wall ends in L. The only thing you do to the left is push out those walls. The exception has nothing to do with if any of the players had prior exposures. So this is just if player A discards, player B wants the tile, they're next, but player C already put out tiles that match the discard, player C jumps the preference and they get it. Many posts, many comments on social media might have you believe this is a new rule. It's not a new rule. It's not a new exception. It's been around for many years in bulletins, in Mahjong Made Easy, and we discussed it in our visual companion guide for American Mahjong. So you might wonder, why is this the exception? Mahjong is considered a looking and listening game. The league's rationale and the way this came about was kind of through bulletins over the years. It is protecting the player that's paying attention. Imagine the situation where player A discards, player B isn't paying attention, they're on their phone, they're looking around. Player C picks up the discard, puts it on their rack, makes an exposure, and then the player next in line goes, oh no, I wanted to make an exposure with that. That's mine, I'm next in line. So the only time that would take preference is if player B had Mahjong and player C was only calling for an exposure. So you snooze, you lose. Player B should be paying attention, and they shouldn't get the tile if they're not, and they just realize it once they see it exposed. However, many players wonder, isn't this going to cause a race to expose? Mahjong's a game of friendship and etiquette. That is not what the league intended. Now, if you're playing in a game and players are racing to slam up those tiles and expose, that might be an issue for that group of players. And you should have an open discussion about how to determine what would happen in this situation. For the most part, most games, even though the rule is if the player had a prior exposure, a lot of games have leeways. Either they're unaware of this rule or they have a house rule that there isn't a race to expose. And if the player next in line said Mahjong, usually a lot of house rules will give it to that player. So great discussion point, something to consider, but also to consider when is the end time for the player next in line to call that tile. Remember, it's also not a best practice to grab that discard first and or to put your exposures up first before you take your discard or to race to grab it. The best thing to do is when you hear a tile that you believe you want, confirm that it's the tile that you thought you heard. Someone puts down a 2 dot, but they actually said 2 bam. Confirm it's the tile, that you didn't mishear it or it wasn't misnamed. Then pick up the discard first and place that on the flat top part of your rack. If this was a rule, if you had to do that first, the exception wouldn't be needed because players wouldn't be taking tiles from their rack and placing them on the top of their rack first. Now, of course, it could always be argued that then it would just become a race to grab the discard. But that would be much more obvious if player A discards, player B, C, and D are all sitting there, and player D reached across the table and grabbed the discard from the center of the table. Most games would give that to player B, the next player in turn, if they said Mahjong as that was happening. So reviewing best practices, the player should first pick up the claim discard, confirm it's the discard, place it on the flat top part of their rack. Now, if they place it in the sloping part of their rack, that is not a rule without a penalty here. The league has said you must place it on the flat part of their rack, but they didn't say what would happen if someone takes a discard and puts it in the sloping part. And the reason for that is there have been many stories of players who need a certain tile, a different tile is discarded, they grab the other tile and then say Mahjong. So it's kind of like a sleight of hand thing. So not that we think anybody we play with would not play honestly and that anybody we play with would cheat, but these certain rules are in place to prevent that and just to prevent the appearance of cheating. So many house rules and many tournament rules might call a player's hand dead if they put the discard directly into the sloping part of their rack. The next step is to add matching tiles from the sloping part and completing that exposure. Once that exposure is complete, you could then discard, or if you have the opportunity to, do a joker exchange, or if you don't have any discards, say Mahjong. So we didn't discuss yet some other terms that are used very regionally to call tiles or nationally to pause the action. So hold and pause are not recognized officially as ways to call a tile. The league actually defines hold, which we consider similar to pause or wait, as stopping play before possibly making a call. Player may also use wait. So this is from Mahjong Made Easy. So what this means is if a player next in turn, so player A discard, player B's next, if they say hold or pause, C or D can't do anything at this point. They can't then expose tiles and say, oh no, but I exposed, I get the tile now. Their action is frozen. If a player not next in line says pause, that doesn't take preference over player B, whose rightful tile it is to call the tile. So pause or hold are just kind of like a stop motion camera. You're stopping what's going on, but you're not changing any kind of rule about who would get the tile. Today's hand of the day, we're staying in that 2, 4, 6, 8 fixed section, and we're moving on to hand number 3. We have a pair, a pung, a pair, a pung, and then a kong. This is all in one suit, which is reinforced by it all being in one color, so the dragon must match. And this is what we call a fixed section, so you must use these numbers in this pattern. This is only one of 6 hands on the card that has a kong of dragons. So it kind of seems low that there's only 6 hands that have a kong of dragons. So what we do in our Zoom and in our PDF is we go through different groupings on the card. And this is one of those things we discuss. What's good about this is if you see a Kong of Dragons as an exposure, then it narrows down for you what somebody could be playing defensively. And we go through also how helpful it is to be able to recognize patterns and recognize hands on the card. If you have ideas for upcoming daily talk of the tiles, we would love to hear from you. Our email is modernmahjong@gmail.com. As you could tell, we love sharing information, discussing rules, recognizing official rules so then players can determine if they want to play by house rules. Tag your friends so they don't miss out and you could all play on a level playing field and play with confidence. On Instagram and Facebook, we're Modern Mahjong. We're also Mahjong Community, the group, and we're on YouTube. So we invite you to like, comment, save, and share. And with that, we hope you have a great day and a great game.